Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth. Let's get into it. Some disrespect does not arrive as yelling. It arrives polished, smiling, and time for an audience. In this story, the moment that mattered was not only what a wife said at a party, but what she revealed about how she ranked her husband when status was in the room. That is a real decision point in any relationship. Pay attention to who your partner becomes when impressive people are watching. If they need to shrink you to feel taller, the problem is already deeper than one bad night. The sentence that ended my marriage was spoken over a tray of crab cakes and sparkling water in a downtown Detroit ballroom dressed in gold linen and white roses. My wife said it with a smile, so controlled it barely moved her lipstick. Dorian handles warehouse problems. She told a circle of donors. I build institutions. A few people laughed because they thought it was harmless. One man looked at his shoes. I remember the jazz trio near the window, the cold shine of the river outside, and the way my fingers tightened around a sweating glass until I nearly cracked it. I did not answer her there. I left. I walked to the lobby of Marquette Hotel with my back straight and my face calm, because I was raised by a father who believed dignity should never be handed to a crowd. Outside, March wind came off the river like a warning. I stood under the awning and watched valets jog between black SUVs while my phone vibrated 3 times in my jacket. I did not check it. I kept hearing the exact rhythm of her voice. Not angry, not drunk, deliberate. That was the part that hurt. It was not a slip. It was a ranking. I had finally heard my place. If you have ever watched somebody get disrespected in public and knew that moment changed everything, stay with this story, because what happened after that party did not end in the ballroom. It ended in court. And if you enjoy real relationship drama stories with consequences, like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful storytelling, and subscribe for more stories like this. My name is Dorian Ellis. I was 42 that spring, born on the west side of Cleveland, living in a brick colonial in Grosse Pointe Park, and serving as operations vice president for a food distribution company that kept half the Midwest stocked with everything from school milk cartons to hotel coffee. My work was not glamorous. It smelled like cardboard, diesel, freezer air, and urgency. It also paid our mortgage, funded our children's schools, covered my mother-in-law's physical therapy one winter, and gave us the kind of comfort my wife had once said she did not care about. People say class is quiet. Money is not. My wife, Nia, was 41 and could make any room tilt toward her without raising her voice. She ran development for the Harbor and Ash Learning Foundation in Detroit, a nonprofit that had grown from neighborhood reading labs into a polished education brand with donor dinners, panel discussions, and glossy annual reports full of children photographed near sunlight and books. Nia had a gift for memory. She remembered names, wives' birthdays, where a board member's son wanted to go to college, which donor hated cilantro, which trustee preferred to be called doctor outside the hospital. She called that being thoughtful. Sometimes it was inventory. We had been married 14 years. We had 2 children, a 17-year-old daughter named Imani and a 10-year-old son named Caleb. Imani wore big silver hoops and kept a sketchbook under her mattress filled with clothing designs and cityscapes. Caleb collected transit maps from every city we visited and fell asleep with history podcasts murmuring by his pillow. We were not a dramatic family from the outside. We did homework at the dining table, argued over thermostat settings, took summer drives to Lake Erie, and ate fish on Fridays because my grandmother started that custom and nobody had the heart to end it after she passed. Ordinary is easy to misread from a distance. When I met Nia, she was teaching 7th grade English in Baltimore and wearing scuffed boots with long skirts because she rode the bus in every season and believed practical shoes were a form of self-respect. I loved that about her. She would underline sentences in library books with sticky notes instead of buying the books, then talk about Baldwin like she knew him personally. I was a route planner then, still trying to make middle management before 30, still ironing my own shirts on Sunday nights while listening to baseball on the radio. We fell in love talking over diner coffee near Penn Station, both of us hungry and building. She used to ask real questions about my work. Not the shallow kind people ask while scanning the room. Real ones. How do grocery stores never run out of bananas at the same time? What happens if snow shuts down 3 roads at once? Do drivers memorize those routes? I would draw little diagrams on napkins, and she would laugh at how excited I got over timing windows and cold chain compliance. Back then, she said competence was attractive. She said the world ran on invisible labor, and she respected people who kept systems from falling apart. I believed her because she sounded like herself when she said it. I do not know when that changed. The early years were lean, but honest. We rented the top floor of a row house in Baltimore with a radiator that banged all night like somebody trapped in the walls. We bought furniture from church rummage sales and painted over scratches instead of replacing anything. On Fridays, we split lemon pepper wings from the carryout and argued about novels versus documentaries. She wanted to change public education. I wanted to run regional operations by 40. We were not chasing shine. We were chasing stability with purpose. When I got promoted and moved us to Detroit, Nia cried in the car from happiness because we could finally afford a washer and dryer. Detroit changed us differently. I found my footing in an industry built on reliability, and reliability gets rewarded when everybody else is chaotic. She left classroom teaching, earned a graduate degree, then stepped into nonprofit fundraising with a speed that surprised even her. Within 5 years, she was sitting on panels, photographed beside judges and CEOs, speaking at luncheons in jewel tones and clean heels. At first, I was proud in the uncomplicated way a husband should be proud. I bought flowers after major events. I learned board names. I practiced my tuxedo smile. I believed this was our rise, even when I noticed she was slowly editing me out. It was never one giant shift. It happened in pinpricks. Nia began correcting how I introduced myself. Say operation strategy, not warehouse management. She would pick at my suits. That tie is too funeral. She said my laugh carried too far in quiet restaurants. At a fundraiser in Bloomfield Hills, she once stepped on my toe under the table because I mentioned truck driver shortages during dinner with a venture capitalist. Later, she told me I had industrial energy and needed to understand the context. I told myself she was stressed, ambitious, and tired. I told myself marriage required translation. What I was really doing was sanding down my own humiliation into something easier to hold. The party that broke us was the Ashford Scholarship Winter Benefit, hosted in late March after the first teasing days of spring, when Detroit still did not trust warmth. I had spent that entire Thursday managing a refrigeration failure at our Toledo hub. 40,000 pounds of dairy product were at risk, and if we mishandled the timing, 3 school districts would have been short on deliveries by morning. I changed clothes in my office, shaved with a travel razor, and drove north in dress shoes at pinch because I had no time to stop home. Nia knew all this. She still texted me twice. Do not be late, and please look polished. When I arrived, the ballroom was already glowing with donor money. Glass chandeliers, soft strings, floral centerpieces tall enough to block honest conversation. Nia was in a bronze silk gown with one shoulder bare, wearing the diamond studs her aunt left her and the face she used for rooms where influence mattered. She kissed my cheek in the air, not quite touching me. "You made it," she said, with relief that sounded closer possession than affection. Then she adjusted my lapel and whispered, "Stay light tonight, Dorian. No shipping stories." I should have gone home then. That was the first decision I could have made differently. Instead, I stayed because I was still trying to be useful to a woman who only seemed to like me when I functioned correctly. I took my place beside her and let myself be steered through the room. I shook hands with orthodontists, software founders, retired athletes, the widow of a car dealer, and a city councilman who sweated through linen. Nia introduced me with careful economy. "My husband, Dorian." Sometimes she added, "He is in logistics." Never the title I had earned. Never the scale of what I managed. I noticed because omission has weight when it is repeated. You can feel it in the body like the weather before rain. Then we stopped at the table that mattered most to her that night. Raymond Voss, a private equity man with perfect teeth, his wife Elise, a board chair named Marlene Bishop who wore cathedral blue, and a younger founder from Chicago everyone kept calling brilliant. Nia had been trying for months to land the Voss family as lead backers for a literacy and tech initiative. I knew because I had listened to her rehearse the pitch in our kitchen, while Caleb colored train stations beside us. Raymond asked what I did, friendly enough. Before I could answer, Nia smiled and said, "Dorian keeps pallets moving. I build futures." It landed exactly the way she wanted. Light enough to amuse, sharp enough to establish hierarchy. Marlene laughed politely. Elise gave me a quick look that read as an apology. Raymond nodded like he had learned everything he needed to know. I felt something deep in me go still. I could have matched her there. I could have said, "Actually, the systems I run feed schools, hospitals, and families while your husband monetizes debt." I could have embarrassed her back. That was the second decision. That could have gone another way. But I saw Caleb's face, then Imani's. I knew any public fight would become a story told about my temper, not her contempt. So I set down my glass and said, "Excuse me." Nothing dramatic. No speech. I walked away while she was already shifting into a polished summary of educational equity for people wearing six-figure watches. In the lobby, my reflection in the marble looked tired and older than 42. I took off my wedding ring and held it in my palm. Not as theater, just to feel its weight without meaning attached to it. Nia called twice, then texted, "Where you?" Then, "You are making this awkward." That wording cleared something for me. She was not concerned that she had hurt me. She was annoyed that I had disrupted the set design. I drove home to Grosse Pointe with the radio off, and my jaw aching from how hard I had clenched it. The streets were wet from an earlier rain, and every traffic light seemed to stay red long enough for me to remember another small cut I had excused. This year she called my company's holiday party Forklift Prom. The time she told Imani not to mention my job as summer arts program because people stereotype. In the afternoon she laughed when a neighbor joked that I probably knew how to stack boxes better than emotions. I had laughed too, because sometimes joining the joke feels safer than naming the insult. She came home near midnight smelling like gardenia perfume and champagne. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the under-cabinet light on, my tie gone, sleeves rolled up, the ring placed neatly on a folded napkin. Nia stopped in the doorway and looked at the ring first, then me. "So we're doing symbols now," she said. I heard fatigue in her voice, but no remorse. "No," I said, "we're doing honesty." She dropped her clutch on the counter and exhaled hard. "You walked out on me in the most important room I've been in all year." I almost laughed at that. "You walked out first." She rolled her eyes, a gesture I'd come to hate, because it reduced everything before discussion began. "Dorian, please. It was a joke." "No," I said, "a joke is something funny that both people survive. You were signaling to donors that your work had status, and mine did not." She crossed her arms. "You are being sensitive because those rooms are not your comfort zone." That sentence hit harder than the one at the party because it was private and therefore true to her. I remembered humming the refrigerator, the clock over the stove, the tiny sounds ordinary homes make while something important dies. "I want a separation," I said. She stared at me for 3 full seconds, then laughed once, short and unbelieving. "Over this?" "Not over this. Through this. Because this is where we have been heading for years." She sat down slowly, as if lowering herself into a meeting. "You are exhausted. You had a bad day. We can revisit this tomorrow." "I have revisited it for 5 years," I said. "Tomorrow is just the first day I am saying out loud." When I pushed the ring toward her, she did not touch it. She asked, very quietly, "Do you understand what this will do to the children?" I told her the children had already seen more than we thought. We told Imani and Caleb that Sunday afternoon, while rain tapped the windows and the furnace kicked on and off like an anxious throat clearing. Imani listened with her face turned blank in the way teenagers do when they refuse to give adults the full dignity of their pain. Caleb asked whether his train maps would have to be split between houses. That question nearly broke me. Nia cried before I did, but even then I could not tell whether she was grieving the marriage or the loss of control over its appearance. We promised routine, love, stability, honesty. We used every responsible word people use when they know their children will still hurt anyway. For 2 weeks, we managed a separation, like co-workers dissolving a startup. I moved into a furnished townhouse in Corktown near Michigan Avenue, close enough for school runs and soccer practice. I took the small room for my office and let Caleb help choose a blue comforter for his bed there. Imani asked for a drafting table instead of cute girl decor, which made me smile in spite of everything. Nia and I communicated by text and calendar invites. Clinical, efficient. It almost fooled me into thinking we might salvage some kind of decent co-parenting early. Then her attorney emailed mine with petitions seeking primary custody and child support structure like punishment. I read the filing in my office while the train horns from the old tracks outside sounded low and lonely. Nia's claim was that my schedule was too demanding for a primary residential responsibility, that my travel made me inconsistent, and that the children relied on her for emotional structure and academic oversight. I sat there with the email open and felt a heat rise through my chest that had nothing to do with anger alone. Shame was in it too. Shame that I had mistaken our private war for something contained, when she was willing to rewrite my fatherhood in legal language if it helped her win. I called an attorney before lunch. Her name was Adrienne Cole, and she worked out a narrow brick office near Campus Martius above a coffee shop that roasted beans too dark. She was in her 50s, wore flat shoes, spoke in clean sentences, and kept peppermint tea on her desk instead of water. "Tell me what your wife values most," she said after I explained everything. I almost answered, "The children," because that is the sentence good men are trained to say. But Adrienne watched me long enough that I told the truth. Control, I said. Image. Access. Winning rooms. Adrienne nodded. Then court is where those values get stress tested. She asked me for evidence of involvement. I almost laughed from disbelief because if there's one thing I know how to do, it is document systems under pressure. For 6 years, I had kept a family operations board and a private app, one built myself with templates from old scheduling software. It started because Nia kept forgetting who had signed permission slips and who had bought cleats, and whether Caleb's inhaler refill was done. I tracked school events, pickups, medication logs, music lessons, design camp, pediatric appointments, parent-teacher conferences, grocery spending, and which parent was physically present. Not because I planned for war, because I had been quietly compensating for chaos. Adrienne looked through the records and sat back in her chair. "Mr. Ellis," she said, "you have accidentally prepared for the exact lie she intends to tell." There were calendars color-coded by child and task, receipts from early morning pharmacy runs, emails with teachers where I asked follow-up questions Nia never knew existed, photos stamped with dates showing me at robotics competitions, choir rehearsals, dentist visits, architecture camp drop-off, even a miserable November night at a field hockey game where the temperature had made my knees ache. We printed everything. We organized it into binders so clean they looked like internal audits. I went home that night and cried from pure relief in my parked car. Nia came out hard in the first hearing. She wore a cream suit and pearl earrings and spoke with the measured hurt of someone auditioning for reasonableness. Her attorney described me as devoted but unavailable, financially generous but domestically inconsistent. He used phrases like high-demand executive travel, unpredictable operational crises, and limited daytime presence. Nia testified that Caleb called her first when he was sick and that Imani depended on her for girl things. The judge, a patient woman named Denise Holloway, listened without visible reaction. I learned something that morning. Polished people trust the sound of their own stories so much they stop checking whether the facts can survive daylight. When it was Adrienne's turn, she did not raise her voice once. She simply built the week of our family life in front of the court, like laying track. Monday school drop-off, my badge scan at 7:58, then pediatric appointment at 4:15. Tuesday design portfolio review for Imani, my signed attendance sheet. Wednesday Caleb soccer practice, my text arranging snacks. Thursday emergency inhaler pickup after a weather flare. Friday grocery receipt, dinner photos, homework log. Then she repeated that pattern across months. Nothing dramatic, just consistency. My ordinary fatherhood, which had never been flashy enough for Nia, became impossible to deny when stapled, dated, and entered into the record. The hardest day came when Imani was called to speak. She was 17, tall like my mother, and had learned over the previous year to keep one eyebrow lifted when adults insulted her intelligence. Nia's attorney asked which parent helped most with school. Imani said, "It depends on the kind of help." He tried again. "Emotionally, who are you closest to?" She folded her hands. "That is not the same as who shows up." Then she described me driving her to a Saturday pre-college portfolio review in Ann Arbor during a snow advisory, while Nia attended a donor brunch. She mentioned how I learned fabric terms just to understand her sketches. Nia did not look at her. Caleb was too young to testify formally, but his counselor submitted notes about his attachment and routines. I learned from those notes that my son measured love through predictability. He listed Dad makes breakfast the same every school day as one of the things that made him feel safe. Toast cut diagonally, strawberries on the side, bus tracker open on the tablet, weather report checked twice. I sat in Adrienne's office reading that and had to wipe my eyes. We think children only remember birthdays and vacations. They remember systems. They remember which adult steadied the morning. They remember the hand that put the right shoes by the door before they even asked. The court process stretched into summer. Detroit heat laid itself over the city like damp fabric. Air conditioners rattled. Asphalt shimmered. I learned how to live in suspended grief. In the mornings, I managed route disruptions and staffing issues. In the evenings, I helped Kayla build a cardboard model of Chicago Union Station and listened to Imani debate whether she wanted Parsons or RISD more. At night, once they slept, I sat on my little back patio in Corktown with no music and thought about the life I had mistaken for partnership. I missed my wife some nights, which embarrassed me. People think missing someone means you were wrong to leave. It does not. Nia and I saw each other mostly in transitions. School parking lot handoffs, recital rows, a rush exchange outside a pediatric dentist office where she told me Caleb's new backpack was too childish, and I said it was a train, not a cartoon. Sometimes I caught glimpses of the woman I had loved. She still bent to fix Caleb's collar. Before a concert, she still cried at Imani's sketches when she thought no one was watching. But there was a new brittleness in her, the kind that comes when the image has to work overtime because control is slipping. Every interaction felt like she was reading from a polished script while her real panic shook underneath. The reveal that changed everything came from money, not emotion. Adrienne subpoenaed financial records tied to household spending because Nia had implied she could maintain the children's lifestyle independently if granted primary custody. The truth was more complicated. Nia had been using foundation-related perks and donor reimbursements in careless ways, not criminal exactly, but sloppy enough to raise eyebrows. Tickets, travel upgrades, cultivation dinners that looked suspiciously personal, boutique expenses coded as event wardrobe. More important for family court, the record showed she depended heavily on my income, while privately belittling the work that created it. I did not enjoy that discovery. I am saying that plainly because bitterness distorts memory. The ugliest private conversation we had happened in a courthouse hallway after a settlement conference failed. The walls were beige, the carpet smelled old, and a vending machine hummed nearby like a witness refusing involvement. Nia stepped in front of me and said, "You want them because you want to punish me." I answered too quickly. "No, I want them because I know what their week actually looks like." Her face changed. For the first time, she seemed less angry than frightened. "You are good at making lists, Dorian. That is not the same as being needed." I took a breath before answering, because that wound was real. "Needed is not ownership," I said. The final hearing took place on a Tuesday in early September, the first cool morning after a long, hot stretch. Kids were back in school. The city smelled like wet leaves and buses. I wore a navy suit and the watch my father gave me when I got my first management promotion. Nia wore charcoal and looked stunning, which she knew. Judge Holloway reviewed the binders, the testimony, the schedules, the counselor notes, the financial affidavits. Nobody in that courtroom was there for romance anymore. It was systems and credibility now. When you strip a marriage down far enough, sometimes what remains is simply this: who could be trusted with the unglamorous rhythm of children's lives? The ruling was not total destruction for either of us, though Nia experienced it that way at first. Judge Holloway awarded joint legal custody, with primary residential placement to me during the school week and substantial parenting time to Nia, including alternating weekends, one midweek overnight, share holidays, and expanded summertime. She emphasized continuity, documented involvement, and the children's own express routines. Then she said something that settled over the room like dust after a shelf fell. This court is concerned by evidence that one parent repeatedly demeaned the labor that materially supported the household while relying upon it. Nia looked down. I did not. I needed to hear every word. Outside the courtroom, people move around us with their own griefs and victories folded in manila envelopes. Nia stood near the elevators, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles blanched. You took what mattered most to me, she said. I had thought I would feel triumphant if she ever said something like that. I did not. I felt tired. No, I said, you put what mattered most on the table and treated it like leverage. The court took your version of control. There's a difference. She blinked hard and looked away. The elevator doors opened behind her, then closed again because neither of us stepped in. We were both standing in the wreckage. The first 3 months after the ruling were the hardest of my life. Winning custody does not feel like winning when your son cries because his favorite pajamas are at the other house, and your daughter comes downstairs pretending she does not care that her mother forgot a school form. I learned to braid stress into routine. Sunday meal prep. Monday backpack reset. Wednesday library stop. Friday diner night at a place in Mexican Town where Caleb ordered pancakes for dinner and Imani sketched strangers in a spiral notebook. I failed plenty. Burned grilled cheese. Missed one email from a teacher. Snapped once when Caleb spilled juice on court papers. Then apologized immediately. Therapy helped more than pride wanted to admit. I found a counselor in Midtown who had a shelf full of jazz records and asked questions that made silence useful instead of threatening. She helped me name the thing I had been living with for years. Not just disrespect, but erosion. Small repeated diminishments that teach you to defend your worth in pieces instead of leaving. She also asked why I had stayed so long. My answer took weeks to form. I stayed because competence can become a prison for men like me. When you are the steady one, everybody rewards your endurance, and nobody notices what it costs until you stop absorbing impact. Nia stumbled before she steadied. Caleb came home one Thursday saying Mommy had forgotten pickup, and he waited with the aftercare teacher for 40 minutes. I called Nia ready to fight, then heard her crying before she even spoke. A donor lunch had run long. Her phone had died. She had panicked. I know how this sounds, she said. It sounded human, which was strange after so many months of legal armor. I could have used that moment against her. I did not. I drove Caleb back over after dinner with his overnight bag and a charger. Boundaries are not revenge. That lesson took me too long to learn, but I learned it. Something softened the winter after. Not between us romantically. That was over beyond repair. But in this way, damage sometimes stops spreading once everyone finally sees it. We sat on opposite sides of a middle school auditorium watching Caleb play Frederick Douglass in a Black History Month program, his voice shaking on the first line and strengthening by the third. When the applause started, Nia and I both stood at the same time. Later, in the hallway, she looked at me and said, "He memorized that speech at your kitchen table, didn't he?" I said yes. She nodded once, and there was no sting in it, just recognition. Imani left for Rhode Island the following fall to study apparel design. The day we moved her into the dorm, Nia and I spent 6 straight hours lifting bins, assembling shelves, and pretending not to notice each other's efficiency. At one point, I found myself handing Nia the Allen wrench before she asked for it. Old marriage muscle memory. She laughed softly and said, "Still reading the room better than you admit." We ate bad pizza with Imani that evening and listened to her explain campus politics like a mayor. Back at the hotel, Nia thanked me for covering first semester housing when her work bonus disappeared. It was the first thank you that sounded unperformed. A year later, I got invited to speak on a workforce panel at a Detroit public policy forum about supply chains, labor dignity, and food access. Nia was moderating a different panel on educational inequality in the same building. During a break, We ended up in the green room together beside a tray of fruit nobody wanted. She asked about refrigeration analytics. I asked about her foundation's neighborhood reading vans. We spoke like two professionals who finally understood that seriousness lives in many forms. Before she left for her session, she said, "I was cruel because your work made me feel ordinary in ways I did not know how to confess." I believed her. That did not restore the marriage. Some cracks teach, but they do not heal into load-bearing walls again. Still, over time, our children saw something useful. Two flawed parents learning to speak without contempt. Caleb is 12 now and still tapes train maps to his bedroom wall. Imani sells custom jackets online and calls only when she needs money or tenderness, which is how 20-year-olds say they love you. Nia remains excellent in rooms full of influence, but she has changed. She asks Caleb's bus route before donor events. She asks about my warehouse automation pilot and actually listens. Respect arrived late, but it arrived honestly. Sometimes late is the only version adults earn. I still think about that ballroom sometimes. The gold cloth, the donor smiles, the sentence meant to make me small enough to fit inside her ambition. For a while, I told the story as if court was where I took what she valued most. That is not exactly true. The court did not give me revenge. It gave structure to reality. It protected my children from becoming bargaining chips and forced both of us to answer to facts instead of image. What Nia valued most was control without consequence. She lost that. What I gained was harder and better. My children's trust, my own voice, and a life that no longer required me to disappear politely. If this story showed you that disrespect can cost more than people think, let that be a reminder that character always shows up in the end. Like this